Social Perspectives is brought to you by Everett and Kennings.
Sometimes God interrupts the normal course of history and gives us leaders whose gifts and insights are used to transform a generation. We have the privilege of presenting such a leader. He is an accomplished jazz musician, best-selling author, entrepreneur, and beloved CM minister of Mill Branch Baptist Church, J.G. Everett Ministries. Our host, Dr. J. Gentile Everett.
Hello, I'm J. Gentile Everett. Welcome to Social Perspectives. In 1838, J.C. Pritchard, a famous anthropologist, lectured on the extinction of races. He said, "It was obvious that the savage races could not be saved. It was the law of nature." Later on, in 1864, W. Winwood Reade, an esteemed member of both London's Geographical and Anthropological Societies, published a special book called Savage Africa. He ended his book with a rather insulting prediction on the future of the Black race. He said, "England and France will rule Africa. Africans will dig the ditches and water the deserts. It will be hard work, and the African will probably become extinct. We must learn and look at the result with composure. It illustrates the beneficent law of nature that the weak must be devoured by the strong." In 1850, Robert Knox, in The Races of Man, took a kind of dismal view and look on the Black race. He took what was unscientific and was able to codify it into an accepted standard of even science itself. He said that race and intelligence are all linked to hereditary. He believed that being a kind of devout and honorable anatomist, he was in a position to assert these kinds of claims. He concluded, people of color were intellectually inferior, not because of the size of their brain, but because of the brain texture. And the brain texture of the people of color lacked nerve endings. And he concluded, because of the texture of the brain in people of color, they will always be psychologically, emotionally, and intellectually inferior. This is what's so incredible about such a bizarre assertion. Research concluded that Dr. Knox only performed the autopsy on one person of color in his entire life. How can you draw such a bizarre conclusion when your sample size is limited to one person? We must go on because I am trying to establish a kind of substratum for a baseless and bizarre argument that some have made against people of color. Even in the area of eugenics, there was an effort to breed better humans during the same time. It was such an obsession with so many of these bright minds that they believed that the reproduction of people with good genes was absolutely necessary, and those who had bad genes should be discouraged from even having children. Eugenics effectively lobbied for social legislation to keep racial and ethnic groups separate. It was amazing. They wanted to restrict immigration from Asia, from Africa, and from Southern and Eastern Europe. And those who somehow managed to get through, they wanted to make sure all of them were sterilized because they concluded they were genetically unfit to bring more of themselves into a world that they did not create. It is amazing how some of these claims, as baseless as they were able to find occupation in the minds of so many, particularly in America. This can be shown and certainly can be demonstrated by the Interracial Marriage Act. Do you know by 1915, there were 28 states that would prohibit marriage between Negroes, Asians, Indians, Latinos with a white person. Even 6 of those states included it in their state constitutions. The United States took eugenics and they ran with it, making it a part of mainstream society. By 1928, there were 376 separate college courses that had an enrollment of 20,000 students focused on eugenics with the baseless model that had been handed down to them. An analysis of the high school textbooks from 1914 to 1928 revealed that the majority of the information that was presented regarding eugenics, it was considered legitimate because it had been skewed and it had been embellished to satisfy some innate need that that group of people called Caucasians needed in order to feel better about making sure that people of color stayed in their place. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. These shoes are inspired by the rise of Senator Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee for Vice President of the United States of America. The pink and green represents her sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated. The black soul represents Howard University, the undergraduate college she attended, and HBCU. And the gray represents that love is authenticated when it is integrated. Get your pair, aliveshoes.com/Renaissance/JGE. That's aliveshoes.com/Renaissance/JGE and get a part of American history. Ah ha ha!
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
Welcome back to Social Perspectives. During the Reformation period, that period covers the 16th and 17th century. Many wonderful things was happening during this time. Particularly, there was a great move in the Christian church. The Reformation period. Surely you've heard of some of those names of the Reformation period, like Martin Luther, like John Calvin. You've heard of these names, and John Smythe, and so many others that came and pulled away from the Catholic Church. Quickly, let me share with you. The Catholic Church was the greatest church on the planet during this time and had been for centuries. See, the word Catholic means universal. So the Catholic Church was the biggest, it was the most powerful. But like every other organization, if we're not careful, power in the wrong hands can become devastating to the growth of that organization. There came a time in the Catholic Church when the Catholic Church sort of stepped out of its boundaries, when popes started to believe that they had the power to forgive sins, and they had the power to release dead souls out of purgatory into heaven. Isn't that amazing? You could go to the Pope and you could pay a certain fee, and the Pope would then release your loved one from purgatory and they could go to heaven. And it was believed widely. One of the members asked, how long does it take for my loved one to be released from purgatory and enter into the pearly gates of heaven? And the Pope said, as soon as the coin clanks the plate, I can release them. And needless to say, there were some theologians that just had problems with that idea. And Martin Luther was the chiefest among them. He had problems with this practice, which was called indulgences. He had a problem with that. So much so until he decided that he was going to tack on the church during Wittenberg the 95 Theses that he had against the Catholic Church. Surely y'all have heard about that. Well, during this time, he had to run for his life because he understood when you went against the church during that particular time, you could be charged with heresy, and heresy could lead you to execution. Just simply be removed from the earth. And they felt that they were legitimate in doing so. Because you have to remember during these times there were popes and kings and the like, people who had nobility associated with them. They believed that they were there by divine rights. That means there was nobody over them to give them any supervision, or there was no one to whom they needed to become accounted. So here, Martin Luther was one of those that decided, no, we are going to have to leave. I'm going to have to separate from the Catholic Church. And he did. He started the Lutheran Church. But that's just a sidebar. That's just a side part of the story. Do you know in the 16th and the 17th century, one of the biggest problems that was facing the Christian hierarchy was, are these people of color soulless, and are they completely human? African Americans and Indians at that time, they were trying to decide whether or not they even had a soul. Well, the Catholic Church was the first to embrace the African and say the African does have a soul. He's still enslaved, but he does have a soul. And in the Catholic Church, they ruled that you could not kill a slave unless you had reason. Can you imagine? Can you put your mind around? You can't kill this African unless you have a reason. They did not list what the reasons had to be. They didn't say it had to be subordination. It didn't say it had to be because they were running away. They just said just reason. Everybody knows how subjective that can be, and only God knows what some of those reasons may have been that would allow or give them the comfort in killing somebody simply because they no longer like them. Well, the Calvinists decided that when they moved away from the Catholic Church, they had their slaves, but they were slower in embracing this idea that these dark-skinned people had a soul. They were a little slow. Took them a little while before they would embrace that idea. What was interesting, however, with the increasing need for economic growth, they had to find a way to keep the slaves working. So it became more of an economic thing than it was a spiritual awareness. So what we have from that, we simply have a group of even church-going people still having trouble with the dark-complected individuals being equipped with a soul that was accountable to God. What a sad commentary, what a sad theology to embrace. I will tell you this. In Genesis chapter 9, verse 25 through 27 was the foundation upon which many of these theologians based their theology concerning slaves. And it had to do with a curse Noah gave to Canaan. And Noah said that you will be servant to your brothers. God will live in the tents of Shem. He will enlarge the territory of Japheth, but Canaan will be servant to all. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
It has been said that power in the wrong hands is a recipe for personal destruction. This has never been more true than in the life of Dominique Washington. Her gains would become her grief. Her unbridled lust and selfishness would be interwoven in her plots. The shocking revelations, jaw-dropping surprises emerged when she realized the lack of a personal core makes one hollow inside. And the cost of that inward emptiness can be incalculable. The invincibility and hubris to which she had grown accustomed would cloud her judgment, and the darkness of her own familiar behavioral patterns brought all to unknown discoveries of the influence the weak would have in her success. Then her doom would be the result of her rebellious nature to any source of authority. She does not imagine someone smart enough to outwit her. Later, she is so astonished at how she miscalculated the significance of a special love that it rocked her world. Her coveted justice would ultimately come in ways she never saw coming, and in ways she wished she had not.
Welcome back to Social Perspectives. I want it to be known that I do not espouse violence in any form. I do not embrace misguided anger because even that can sire violence. The reason why I'm cautious about that is because many people, when they start to argue a principle, it becomes personal. And when it becomes personal, then there is an escalation in tone, in temper, in taste, and then all-out violence can erupt. So I am not one who embraces that kind of thinking and that kind of interaction. But I do want you to know that while I do not embrace violence, I do better understand some of the things that happened in the past. I better understand it. I want to mention now that many of you have studied American history, particularly the turbulent 60s. You came across names like H. Rap Brown, Stokely Carmichael. You heard some of these names. You may have heard of a group called the Black Power, the Black Panther movement, the Black Panthers and the Black Power. Surely you've heard those things. Some try to argue that they were simply a radical militant group organized to inflict and incite violence. Those who are not very well educated on the Black Panther, that's what they saw. They saw it because they saw these young black men. They were dressed a certain way. They carried themselves a certain way. The hats that they wore, the jackets. Let me tell you, if you think they were simply a thuggish mob, you got the wrong idea of who they were. They were intelligent. They were bright. They had read the Constitution. Some were even going to law school. They were brilliant young men and women that wanted to make a difference in the community that they served. They understood, they saw injustices and inequalities, and they saw how the law would be misapplied when it came to people of color. Many of us don't know anything about their feeding program, their tutorial program, the community activism that they had to try to make the community just a better place. They were not a militant group of thugs just trying to cause trouble. They were only trying to represent quintessential manhood by being informed, being knowledgeable, and being able to share and disseminate their information effectively. That's what the movement was really about. I have no evidence that would give credence to the fact that they were just wanting to hurt people. They just wanted to go blow up America. That's not what their plan was. They just wanted America to live up to its creed, live up to its own pontification. That's all. They just wanted a fair shake for all people. That was it. The black community as a whole during this particular time, they were dealing with unfair, unequal, and even inhumane treatment. So the Black Panther movement was a reaction to the action of oppression. That's what we must recognize. Anybody who is attacked, it becomes a part of their nature for them to respond in some way. All they were trying to do, the Black Panther, was a reaction to an action of oppression. That's what makes the difference. Too many bad ideas, too many ugly thoughts and characterizations people have tried to make, but that's not true. They simply reacted. Like you, like me, like everybody else. We would simply react. And the thing that I had to give them credit for, they reacted in the name of the same Constitution that you used against them. That was their mind. America, we're going to use your words. We're going to use your document to make our argument. That's not a thuggish mob. That's an intelligent response to a problem. I must hasten. I just want us to know that when people are going through difficult times, they look for some way of dealing with it. My message to all of you, let us not forget the power of love. I am on this thing called love because I believe in the end that's the most potent weapon that anyone can use in fighting oppression and unfair treatment. This is not just a preacher speaking. It's something I actually believe from the very core of who I am. I have learned over the years to take whatever attack, take whatever burden, take whatever is thrown your way, and hold on to your own integrity and hold on to who you are and what God made you and the vision that God has given you concerning who you are. You never abandon that, no matter the pain. I have to go now. I wish I could spend some more time with you because this is a subject, as you can tell, it's very passionate with me. I hope you will catch next week's show. I'm going to do a continuation on this. I must. Until that time, keep your head up, stay focused, and go and be all that God will allow you to be. Thank you for joining us. See you the next time on Social Perspectives.